people are making a lot of the fact that, Keir Starmer is in like this really dangerous position, and that there's people who want to get rid of him, and that may very well be true. However, if you want to talk about someone who's in a dangerous position, there is no more currently a leader of a party in a more dangerous position than Kemi Badenoch. Remember, her position has been absolutely in doubt pretty much since day one. Her leadership has been dead on arrival. There has been no leadership. Her performance has been absolutely shambolic. It's been terrible. No one likes her. And yet, she has a successor clearly waiting in the wings with Jenrick. And at this conference, who knows what could happen? Add on top of this that you've just had your first live MP defection from the Tories to Reform, and all of a sudden, her position becomes so much worse. It really, really does. But this, honestly, should be an interesting point, because Kruger, and in his little press conference with Farage, was like, oh, this is, he's going to be like the guy who prepares us for government. Kruger's never been a minister. He's never held a high position of office. The highest I think he's ever held was ironically, when he wasn't an MP, and he was David Cameron's speechwriter. And yet, this is the guy that Reform want to prepare them for government. I don't know about you, but we've been watching the ongoing discussions of what's been going on with, with these councils. Honestly, these councils and what's going on there is pretty much a dress rehearsal for what's going to happen when they are in government. They are going to be an absolute disaster. But by all means, if you want them, vote them in. But we did warn you countless times. Anyway, let's get on into this, because I want to go over what the reaction has been from the actual Conservatives on this, and see what they've had to say about Kruger. Because if you remember when Jake Berry left, they were hardly, shall we say, sad to see him go. So let's go on over to this and find out what their reaction to all this has been. So before, of course, we do continue into all this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and, of course, subscribe button. And, of course, don't forget to ring the bell as well, so you get a notification of when we go live or when we drop a new video. So thank you very much to all those people who do that. Of course, down below as well, there's the Patreon page, there's the Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee, the YouTube thank you button, and, of course, as always, there is the YouTube membership button down below. And, of course, it is Wednesday tomorrow, so there will be a new membership video for all the Patreon people and the YouTube members as well. So, as always, let's crack on then into this, because this, as always, is going to be interesting to see how the fallout really goes for Badenoch. But it just goes to show you how much trouble she really is in. So, Kruger's resignation letter was kind. The fallout could now prove brutal for Badenoch. And they've got this start off with a little thing from his resignation letter. And I have to say, this resignation letter is so weird. It goes, I very much regret that I couldn't give you or the party any warning of what I am doing this morning. Like, what? Oh, yeah, I'm not going to tell you that I'm defecting. I'm giving you absolutely no warning whatsoever. I'm leaving, but, I have really personal great respect for you. So, bye. Just, what kind of a resignation letter is that? That, to me, by the way, speaks of someone who maybe isn't 100% sure of the move he's just made and is keeping, shall we say, his bridge unburned. He didn't cross over to Reform and just burn the bridge like Lee Anderson did. He's very, very much kept that bridge intact. So if he ever, shall we say, wants to come back, than he could do on that one. So let's get on into this. So thus then began, of course, Danny Kruger's resignation letter to the chief whip. The only other person I'm aware he tipped off was then Robert Jenrick, his old leadership hopeful, before announcing he was off to reform UK. Gee, I wonder if Robert Jenrick becomes leader of the Tories, if Kruger will will switch back all of a sudden. Badenoch, whose leadership, at least until yesterday morning, had served now as a shadow minister, addressing Kruger's move in a message now to all Tory MPs on their WhatsApp group last night, recognizing that no leader wants to lose a colleague, as we did this morning. Badenoch told their MPs, the only way we will succeed is now by working together as a team, knowing that our principles, values, and ideas will win the public over eventually. Oh, yeah, don't worry, guys. Eventually. He also went on to add, we are now trying to renew our party, preparing to rebuild our country. There will, of course, be now bumps in the road, but we are on the right track. What track is that? You've got no policy. You're not putting out anything to win people back at all whatsoever. Eventually, of course, is doing some very heavy lifting. And is currently now what concerns a lot of Conservative MPs. Too much hopes is now pegged on things all turning out now for the best, rather than actually making it so. Which is, again, not the best strategy really to pursue. Because, you actually have to do things, Badenoch. If you don't do things, then guess what? Very little actually happens. Anyway, her message was, of course, very combative at parts. She did highlight Labour, of course, distracted the current economy sinking, reform, quote, committing now to left-wing economics and unlimited welfare spending. It was also very defensive. She reminded MPs that Tories must now remain the party of professional, fiscal, and civic responsibility. No one else will do this. This tone, of course, seemed to be now shifted from a recent Laura Kuenssberg appearance, where she blithely used any Tory unhappy that the leadership was now welcome to leave. The clip has now been doing the rounds, with people now pointing out that perhaps her MPs are now finally listening to her. Very true indeed. Kruger is now a defection that, of course, hurts. He is, of course, no Jenkins, Barry, or Doris. A Tory for at least over 20 years, Kruger was once David Cameron's speechwriter, with credit now going to him for the notorious hug a hoodie speech. A friend now of Dominic Cummings, he went on to work as Boris Johnson's political secretary during the Brexit years. Later, he was then elected as a Tory MP for Denver's back in 2019, and then serving now as defence minister. He has also currently carved a very much political profile of himself as a philosophical thinker, fueled by conservatism and Christianity. Gee, I wonder why he's going to reform. He opposed, of course, the assisted dying, championed free speech, and what hits most, of course, with his moves to reform, seems now destined now for a very serious role in a post-election Tory revival. Which was why now his departure was now lauded with such a thud. One shadow cabinet minister admitted there was much disappointment and a genuine shock. Even if he wasn't everyone's cup of tea, another MP calls it now a major blow. Kruger's hop along the benches was not just another former Tory trying to stick the knife in. It was, as one MP puts it, roundly sad news. But the question now that keeps being asked in Westminster is if that there is any other bright Tories on the right of the party, now with futures ahead of them, now facing the same set of circumstances. Will they now start coming to the same conclusion? It may very well be likely so. I would not be too surprised if there is, and I think it really hinges on the conference. Badenoch as always, as any leader, they go out and they do their speech. And how that speech is received by the MPs, by the people, will be very interesting. Not only that, but remember, there's now multiple rumors going around that MPs, pardon me, are now determined to go, we are not going to go to the conference. So not every single Tory MP is going to actually be at the Conservative conference. That is Yeah, Badenoch's position is not the best at the moment. So Farage, of course, declared Kruger will not be the last. Frost, of course, later hinted that even MPs on the right are also thinking maybe now it's game over for the party. Maybe it's time for me to go too. One shadow cabinet minister then assured that there were now people in both houses, both the Commons and the Lords, who were ready to make the switch. So if this is the case, I can guarantee you there are going to be some huge rumblings going on in the Conservative Party. What's going to go on behind the scenes here? And this isn't a surprise. There were always those Tory MPs who were far, far more on the right, far more aligned with reform than they were even their own party. So what then happens? But remember, what are the reform people fighting about? Oh, there's all these old ex-Tories. Farage, currently trying to dish out a lot of this populism rhetoric, how is he going to fulfill some of those promises when all you've got are these very hard right Tory MPs that are like, no, we ain't going to do that at all? How's that going to work out as a form of government? You know, it spells huge bad news for any government that Farage might try to form. A number of course, obvious suspects, of course, have now themselves ruled themselves out privately. Although that is, of course, not necessarily a guarantee, given almost nobody knew about Kruger until it happened. He'd been quiet, one MP had said, but it's no. But he, of course, he's not a big socializer, so nobody really read into it. The maybe, of course, not seen it coming gives this, of course, recent comments about reform in the chamber that need now have referred to them as now piggybacking and in a very desperate search now to be relevant, alleging that they would now spend money like drunken sailors. Does actually Kruger believe that his addition to the party could somehow temper all of that? I I cannot work out what is going on in his head. He thinks now he's a better gambler and now sticking around for any possibility and likely again a generic leadership, asked one MP, especially of course seeing Kruger now served as Jerrick's own campaign manager. And that's even more damaging because even if you were a right-wing Tory and you were willing maybe to wait out Badenoch because you knew Jenrick would be coming in later, what does this now say about maybe you waiting for Jenrick? Are you now maybe even more convinced that Jenrick is not going to do it? Because all Jenrick, remember, all he's doing is a very cheap version of Nigel Farage. And why are voters that were Tories that have maybe voting reform now? Bear in mind, that's another big thing we are seeing. We are seeing a lot of Tory switching in this, in a lot of these recent local by-elections on this as well. Even local, like Conservatives, they're switching over to reform because they think they fancy their chances better running as a reform candidate than they do as a Tory candidate because they're being told by their constituents they're going to go vote reform. So there is a lot going on the ground level that could also be influencing this quite a bit as well. So in his press conference, it continues, Kruger said that he now believes it is now too late for the party, that any changes will now be defunct. It made one Tory source ponder. I wonder if he decided that either Badenoch was not going to change course or that she wasn't going to go anywhere anytime, anywhere soon enough. Maybe that is the point. And this is something worth pondering. That if Badenoch's going to change course, why stick with the party? And if she isn't going to go anywhere time soon, remember the threshold for the 1922 committee has been upped. So you need a really big majority now of like current MPs to like vote against it, to vote her out. So who knows? Who knows? I think the conference itself could be ever interesting, depending how Badenoch's speech goes at the Tory conference. That could be perceived very badly. If that goes down, who knows? But Badenoch's position is very, very dangerous. At the end of this month, her protection comes up. At that point, MPs can launch a challenge against her. What will happen? Will we see a leadership challenge put against her? We don't know. There's been rumors, there's been murmurings, but it's very likely to happen at some point. Just when? And maybe he's gone, you're not going to be able to get rid of her very easily. So why go through all that fight where you can go and join Reform? That may be the gamble he has made. So back to this. There is also, of course, the small matter of principle. If Kruger is a very conscientious man, as he claims, why not trigger, of course, a by-election to see if his constituents then agree with him? But he has now ruled this out. And when one former Tory MP, Christian Wakefield, defected to Labour back in 2022, Farage said that by not calling a by-election now made him a dishonourable member for Bury South. By that very same measure, should Kruger, of course, not be the very same dishonourable member for East Wiltshire? Again, this is something a lot of people have called out for Farage, saying, well, you should call a by-election. He's not calling for a by-election for Kruger. 2022 Farage would be furious with 2025 Farage. But back to this. Speculation, of course, in Westminster is now that the summer gave rise to the influence now of friends, including one Dr. James Orr, a Cambridge academic and reform backer, who is now made up part of the group with which Kruger then visited J.D. Vance with for a barbecue while he was holidaying in the UK. The group also included Thomas Skinner of Bosch and Strictly fame. Reform sphere now of interest now grew during the summer break, while the Tories appeared now to completely vacate the frame. Also, just as Badenoch was now building up some momentum, what momentum? That's if it's any momentum, it's absolutely glacial on that one. She was, of course, hit by her first now defection. One Tory source has now said it is either now going to reopen or now speed up the Kemi question. She maintains that she is not going to blow anything going to blow her off course, but she has to be now knocked after now a very successful attack on Labour. Through the efforts now have revealed details, of course, Peter Mandelson's appointment, Angela Rayner's tax affairs, in what were now called Operation Red September and Operation Stamp Out, respectively. CCHQ has now proven that Tories can actually still do politics, including the politics of opposition. Here's the thing. Anytime you bring that up, you can just turn around to the Tories and just go, well, Angela Rayner wasn't exactly hiding this. She actually had a meeting lined up to pay that extra stamp duty. She wasn't dodging it. This wasn't what you guys used to do, who used to say, oh, this is a matter for public opinion, and then just completely ignore it. And not only that, but what Angela Rayner owed to HMRC, quite frankly, was a pittance to what we've seen Tories owe HMRC for dodging these types of things in the past. Anyway, back to this. They've, of course, targeted, of course, very written questions, produced actually researched dossiers, and actually peppered breaking videos with Badenoch now when news came out, now to be very fast to try and respond. Their organization does show at least some deft planning and trying to ramp up the operations. Today, we will actually see now some fruits of that if Labour, after the Tories used the old Brexit favourite, Standing Order 24, to trigger an emergency debate on Mandelson now in the Commons. But there is, of course, no doubt that Danny Kruger's departure has now detained Badenoch after a very good week. Losing a solid Conservative can never be a sign of success, one MP says. It is irreconcilable for the LTO to now claim that this shows her plan is working. And it doesn't. This wrecks anything, any movement, anything she has done. Because over the summer, there was absolutely zero action. Zero action on any Tory plan. They just seem to just effectively go on holiday and not do anything. But yeah, it's not good. Like this has, I would say, reopened the Badenoch question once again. Not that it ever closed up, mind you. It was very much still there. However, Kruger avoided directly trying to wield the knife when it comes to the Tory leader. That's because I think he is still unsure. and he hasn't burnt his bridge. I think that's why he hasn't, shall we say, wielded the knife on that one. Speaking now of his great personal regard now for Badenoch, but that doesn't, of course, mean that she will not be unharmed following it. After all, he concluded that the past year of the Tory party had seen a year of stasis and drift, and that the sham unity now comes not from doing anything bold or difficult or controversial, which we've said before. How the whole reason why none of this, like all the old Tory infighting is breaking out as we used to see, is because Badenoch's actually not doing anything. She's not proposing anything. She hasn't put forward any policy. So there's nothing for these Tories to argue about. Hence why it looks, it's a complete, as he rightly points out, a sham unity. There's nothing for them to argue about, which again might be Badenoch's strategy. And then now, as another shadow cabinet minister tells me, I do not think that it in itself shifts the dial on the leadership, but now there is a sense of inevitability. And if that inevitability now takes hold, then Kruger may have left a very nasty wound for Badenoch to try and tend to. She's not going to survive. Her protection, like I say, comes up. What will happen at the conference may very well decide her fate if she delivers an absolutely awful speech, which, bear in mind, it's Kemi Badenoch. She's not known for making good speeches. How is that going to be then perceived? It's well and truly not a good position for her to be in. And the fact that she hasn't done anything, that she's responded of oh, don't worry, eventually, guys, as it was pointed out, eventually that's some really heavy lifting. Eventually is doing there, you know. But as always, thank you very much for watching, and of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.